We are one game down for the 2025 AFL football season. The Hawks get it done against the Swans, and it's one of just two games that for AFL Fantasy and SuperCoaches, we get a little last-minute look at what a player's doing, where their score, while it may not count, it does impact their price movement early. So in AFL Fantasy, they're going to get a double price movement at the end of round one, while for SuperCoach and Dream Teamers, they are now officially one of their 3-week price cycle movement already in motion. So what does it mean for us with just days now away from the Thursday night clash between the Tigers and the Blues and ultimately the official rolling lockouts commence? What can we take away from this Hawks and Swans matchup? You can't start anywhere else other than a conversation about Will Day. He was just electric in this game, especially in that first half. Kicked all of his 3 goals, I'm pretty sure, in that first half. Set up multiple himself. Ended up with almost double-figure clearance numbers, mid-20s possessions, a handful of tackles and marks to go alongside with his 3 goals. This is exactly the peak of what Will Day can be for us, which is just such a critical and vital cog in this Hawthorn midfield. If before Friday night's game, you're a Will Day owner, you're sitting here right now, tuning in on this episode, a little bit frustrated that the rest of us are able to jump on, should we so believe, knowing again that he's going to get the double movement in AFL Fantasy and he's got one of his 3 moves already in SuperCoach. What does it mean for the next couple of weeks for us? Well, interestingly, I'll come back to this game in a second. The next few weeks, they've got Essendon, they've got Carlton, and they've got Toby Bedford's GWS. Yes, I'm alluding to some potential tags that are almost certain to come his way now. When you are so prolific and so dominant in a match like that, and then when a James Jordan comes and does a pretty good job sitting on your head and negating your impact in the second half, it does give teams the visibility of what they know to be true, which is if we need to sit on him, we can. I think it's going to definitely come his way in at least one, if not multiple, of these games. So yes, a tag is coming, in my belief, for a Will Day. But does it really matter? That's probably the bigger conversation and the bigger question that we should be having around this. Because he's now almost impossible to fade despite having the round 4 bye. You've already got a strong score in that price cycle movement. And the thing that puts him ahead of the queue, potentially of the likes of the Peatlings, the Cherrers, the Hollands, that people were considering in this price packet, is he's already got a known variable. Those two just have hypothetical or forecast ones. And so you can take something to the bank, even with some tag-impacted games of some 80s over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And that is worst-case scenario. You're still looking at a guy who's going to get guaranteed cash movement for you, barring injury, which no one can really predict with full accuracy. And so I think Day's almost impossible to fade. I'll hear the conversation, I'll understand the conversation, but in AFL Fantasy, where I was less keen on him because he's not an accumulator, and even in as dominant as he was in this game, we're only talking about a mid-20s possessions game. We're not talking 35, 40 touches like Sarong can get, for example. He's already got banked cash sitting there with the movement. Take the unknown variable of what these other mid-price guys may or may not do. I think Day almost needs to, in AFL Fantasy, get to the head of the queue of those guys. And it's now about who is the second fiddle that you like in there. SuperCoach, it's a little different, and I'll come back to that in a second, because he's got that pedigree of 110 territories, where in fantasies, he limps to the line of 100, if at all, based off what he sort of does. I think this is an absolute free take as well. Again, you put those same names that I put on the table. He now is, again, already a viable option. You're just banking that acceleration and movement, because if you're shopping in that sort of range, while you hope they turn into season-long keepers, the reality is they're almost certainly not. Bank the cash, take it, absolutely run and go. And with the round 4 bye, despite some challenging matchups early there for the Hawks, it is you get yourself to a place where you can diverge into multiple different options. If he's continuing to just absolutely knock it out of the park, put him on the bench. It's fine. Throw one of those cash cow kids that you're hoping to really pop an 80 that week and maybe sneak into your best 18 scores. That's a great outlet. Conversely, he now creates an option where you can take some of the money that's been made, and it's probably more likely in AFL Fantasy and SuperCoach you do this, but regardless, it's there because you'll only have had the two price movements in SuperCoach and Dream Team, is you can jump all the way over to a Will Ashcroft, and you've then had a couple of free looks. By then, a Tom Green will be back. You can jump over and pick up a piece of that. Gosh, who knows? Maybe even one of these upper price premium mids that you're like, I wanted to just look and see. They've dropped a little bit of cash. Now I'm ready to jump on. He might be well and truly past that $900,000 price point by then. Who knows what the next month holds? But I think Day gives you opportunities and outlets to express, and he's already a week ahead of any of the other mid-price mids that you're looking at. Next up, we should talk about the Swans quickly. There is still a ton of Hawks we've got to get to. Important, though, the Swans are still under a Dean Cox system. They are still prepared to use James Jordan as a tag when needed. This is important for us as we start to look at opposition teams that are coming up against Sydney, especially at halftime where we're thinking, they're not using him. This is amazing. The Jordan tag is no longer a thing. Yes, it may just be a break glass in case of emergency, but the emergency came on Friday night, and that premium mid or that premium running defender that you were hoping might be left free now, no. Under a Dean Cox coached Swans, it's still an option for them, and so just keep that in mind. Next up, we got to talk about Lloyd Meek, don't we? To me, he's still a genuine R1 option or a R2 option, depending on what your structure is looking for. And he offers you a couple of things. We talk about opportunities to diverge into different pathways. Again, with that round 4 bye, someone like a Meek sitting in that spot does create an outlet for you where you can bank the movement and the cash that he's going to deliver for you, where he holds, if not increases his monetary value for you at a touch. And then all of a sudden he gives you the outlet to go, okay, now I'm going to get on Cherry, who may have dropped a little bit of cash if he starts a little bit slow like people project, or get onto a Max Gorn before his hot stretch of games that's pretty much around that time of the bye really opens up. He gives you the option into that space. So Lloyd Meek is absolutely a viable play despite having that early bye. The flag I would put there just to consider is he does have Essendon round 1, who over the last 10 games of 2025 were one of the hardest ruck matchups because they were running a double ruck setup. Yes, he's physically much more imposing than those other two, but it's just a flag to put there. If Essendon run the Bryan and Draper combination, it's not a reason not to, but the expectation of what he could deliver just might not be as high. But Lloyd Meek is an absolute option, but to me, it's not for a front half of the year push, but rather it's for a quick, good time, not for a long time. Matt Roberts, not only is his role secure, but his scoring is secure as well, despite it absolutely bucketing down for almost the final third of the game. It did start to dry up in the last 5 to 10 minutes, but pretty much from the midway, early part of the third through to the middle portion of the final quarter, if not towards the last 5 minutes, it was quite heavy rain. And so for a player of his caliber that gets a lot of his ball movement from handball receives and transition scoring and being an outlet and then ultimately setting up the play, I thought he looked absolutely sensational. Yep, the early buy is not ideal for us, but politely, who cares? We are genuinely looking at a guy that's not only going to make some decent coin for us, but absolutely a player that may just be the last defender you upgrade by the end of the year, if not at all. He looks secure in this role and absolutely a fantastic pick. Something that's not a fantastic pick, Angus Sheldrick is an absolute trap. He copped the red vest and it's time to move on. I know I've been bullish at times about him through the community. I'm glad I didn't put him in my 7 must-have selections, an episode that I dropped on this channel not too long ago. I'm glad I faded the temptation to put him in there. And it was because there was always the percentage chance that he copped the vest. But it wasn't just copping the vest that's turned me away from picking Angus Sheldrick and suggesting to you to do the same. He looked slow. He looked lost. He was always that step behind what was actually happening in the game. Mini Monk put out a post on X that summed it up. He really is the equivalent of a Neil Erasmus. Way too talented at the second tier level of AFL, but then just always seems to be the step behind what's actually happening in the game. And in AFL, you need to be on point or ahead to be able to aid your team's really chances of winning a game. And so I'm sorry, Sheldrick, even if you come out in round one now and knock a 110 out, I'm not going there. The fact that I've seen you get bested, the fact that I've seen you being a little slow in a game that actually counts for something, yeah, I'm not interested in you, Sheldrick. It's time to go. Hey, 3 more things we got to talk about before we wrap up this takeaway episode. Heeney and Warner are an absolute 1-2 punch for the Swans. They had some players that were really decent in this game, but there's something about what these two boys offer through the midfield. It is extraordinary. I wouldn't talk you off the ledge of picking them in your starting squad. For what it's worth, I really wouldn't. Without Goulden, there was an air of expectation and responsibility that had to go somewhere else, let alone with the fact that their captain in Callum Mills wasn't there. And both of these two boys, I thought, stepped up when it really needed and really counted. They had power, they had speed, they had scoreboard impact. I think these are brilliant guys. I think you can look at both of them. The early buy hurts, I understand. And I'm probably not advocating too hard for you to change the premium mid that you've got. But if you just like them and you're like, oh, I wonder what it's going to be like without Goulden, they're going to be fine. I'm pretty happy with what I saw from them. I think you can proceed, if you were keen, with some, with some relative comfort. Would I change my structure to get them? No. Would I jump out of another premium to get them? Look, probably not. But they're a great 1-2 punch and they are so fun to watch. Brodie Grundy is one of either two things. He's not 100% or he's a little washed. I think it's more the former than the latter, but he got absolutely towed up by Lloyd Meek in that first half. And then he did draw back to net neutral in the second. But he's very symptomatic of what Sydney were last year. We saw it again. Slow start, come home like a steam train, and then hope it's enough. But I don't think he's washed as a footballer. I think that's way too harsh. He's got to be carrying an injury because he just didn't look at his competitive best for big chunks early of this game. And so I hope it was just a slow and sluggish start and nothing more serious, but I'd probably drop him down my draft board just that little bit further, maybe only a round or two. The top tier rucks are very secure, but if you're doing your Shiva draft in the next hours or so, nothing was like, oh yes, I've got Brodie Grundy. There's a pushing hundreds ruck. I would not say that. A lower 90s to higher 80s may just be where he is in, on a keeper platform of what he's going to draft. He just didn't look like he was covering the ground like I know Brodie Grundy can. And even that's in contrast to 12 months ago, let alone what he was at his peak. And then the last player we got to talk about is James Sicily. Didn't have a great first quarter. Unbelievable second quarter. He set up everything of the Hawks. Intercepting, playmaking, absolute brilliance. Gets sat on by Will Hayward in the third quarter and does nothing. And then goes forward in the last, offers a goal-scoring outlet. So much to unpack about James Sicily. It was telegraphed that he was going to go forward the moment I saw Sam Frost in the team, let alone when he was the sub. I know they say Battle can go forward. I know Weddle went forward in the third quarter, but politely, outside of Chol, they just don't have any healthy tall forwards. And Sicily going forward is a key reason they won this game again. It's not just the impact of the scoreboard, which he did to kick that match winner, but the contest that he provided for them. It allowed their smalls a chance to really break back into the game after being put on their backsides in the third quarter by the Swans. You can look at this at two ways. One, is Frost going to be the sub every week? Maybe. Is it enough concern for you to jump off him? I think his forward movement is just going to be further confirmation bias for coaches, because we saw what he did when he is setting up the play, and he's going to start in those games. It feels like he's not going to be the forward that starts a game. He's the forward that when they get into the latter quarter to quarter and a bit where Hawthorn need to do something to break it up and win a game, Then they'll flick the switch and throw Sicily forward. By then, he could have already scored, as we saw, 70, 80 fantasy points, 90 SuperCoach points. And him now going forward is actually where the game could be won and really give him a scoring boost. Personally, to me, in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, I've had some tentative interest in Sicily. The forward move was enough for me. If the internal metric I had for me personally was if I see him go forward, I'm off. I don't want any piece of that. I need and want him to be the playmaker and the interceptor in the back line. If he's not that, for 100% of the preseason, I just can't trust it. I've got to get off. SuperCoach, it's still enough there because, again, like I said, the contested marks, the impacting of the scoreboard, these things are still favoured in SuperCoach scoring, and he can do that for us. But he's so good down back. I'd be shocked if he ever started the game of round one, for example, as the forward. He's going to go forward. To me, I'm off the train. I've got no interest now. I've had him at times in my side over the last few weeks. But if someone's like, no, this is exactly what I'm comfortable with this, that's absolutely fine. It's just got to be something you build into your risk profile of your starting squad. There's only so much risk you can have before the reward is too grand and the risk is so high that too many variables need to land. So if you're minimizing some risk in some other selections, whatever that is, you can absolutely still pick him. Personally, for me, the way I've picked my team in the other more non-negotiable selections, I just can't do it. I'm sorry, James. It's not you. It's me. But what were your takeaways from this game? What were the advanced learnings? What changes have you made to your side? I'd love to know. If you're watching this as a video across YouTube, A, subscribe, B, like the video, and then C, comment below and let me know what are the changes you've made to your side as a result of this match. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast, be sure to give us a 5-star rating and follow us. We have got content dropping still every day of the preseason. We've still got a review of the next game and the key takeaways. We have a Q&A episode, some strategy stuff, and a bunch of other things in line for you before we get to Thursday night's game between the Tigers and the Blues. If you've been loving what the coaches panel has dished out for you this preseason, we would so greatly appreciate it if you would become a Patreon. Not only do you gain access to some additional bonus content, but it's one of the great ways you can support and say thank you to the coaches panel for the content you've got from us this preseason. All the details of where you can get in touch with us are in the details of this description. We can't wait to be back with you again tomorrow, talking all things fantasy footy as we get near and near to the start of your fantasy football year.